During a morning meeting, my coworker announced, "We all know you're only here because they feel sorry for you." He stared right at me in front of the entire department. My boss added, "Let's not waste time pretending you'll ever be a real asset." I just nodded and said, "Understood." That afternoon, I made a call that changed the course of their project forever. I graduated in June, top 10% of my class, with a degree in business analytics. I wasn't a genius, but I worked hard. I'd done internships, stayed late, learned the software most people ignored. I wanted a shot at a decent job in a decent company. Not my dream job, just a foot in the door. When I got the offer from Harrifield Consulting, I thought I'd finally made it. It wasn't a big-name firm, but their projects were serious. Logistics, supply chain management, national clients. They interviewed me twice. The hiring manager even called my references. I thought I earned it. My first week, I showed up early, sat in on meetings, took notes, offered help on whatever was needed. No one said much. My manager, Brent, gave me a welcome aboard and sent me a starter project, basic data cleanup. I didn't mind. I figured that's how it starts. But it didn't get better. The second week, Brent passed me over when teams were being assigned for a high-profile project. Said it was too advanced for a new hire. Fine. Then it happened again with the next project. And again, I started to notice little things. Like when everyone was invited for team lunches, I wasn't. When project updates were sent out, I wasn't copied. When I tried to offer input, they talked over me. I thought maybe I was imagining it. But then I heard Derek say it under his breath one Friday afternoon when I stayed late fixing a data, said someone else had messed up. Quota higher. I froze. My ears went hot. He said it low enough that I couldn't be sure if I heard right, but the smirk on his face when he caught me looking, that told me I had. Brent didn't correct him. By Christmas, I was worn down. I worked hard. I stayed quiet. I fixed mistakes, double-checked numbers, caught things no one else did, but they treated me like I was dead weight. Sometimes they'd even leave me off email threads I needed to do my work. I started hearing comments about how lucky I was to have a job at all. At the New Year's party, I overheard Brent talking to another manager in the corner. I hadn't been drinking, so I remember it word for word. "She won't last. HR sent her over because we've got that audit coming up." The other guy laughed. "Well, at least she keeps quiet." I should have walked away then. Maybe I should have reported it. But I didn't. I swallowed it. I told myself I'd prove them wrong. January, February. I kept going. They gave me grunt work, menial tasks, but they didn't know how much I saw, how much I learned just by sitting in that office, doing their scraps. Then came that Monday morning in March. It was a regular team review meeting. Everyone sat around the table, Derek, Brent, the other senior analysts. I brought the printouts, like I always did. Brent started off with his usual routine about performance standards. I kept my head down, making notes, listening. Halfway through, Derek stretched in his chair, looked right at me, and said, "We all know you're only here because they feel sorry for you." Like it was a joke. Like everyone would laugh. No one did, but no one said anything either. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mouth went dry. I looked at Brent. He leaned forward, sipped his coffee, and said, "Let's not waste time pretending you'll ever be a real asset." He said it in the same tone he used when asking someone to refill the printer. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Understood. They moved on with the meeting like nothing happened. I walked back to my desk, sat down. My hands were shaking, but I kept my face blank. I opened the shared drive, stared at the project file on my screen. This wasn't some random file. This was the project. The logistics optimization deal they'd been chasing for 6 months. Brent's golden ticket. The one where I'd been cleaning data, fixing errors, patching gaps they didn't even notice. The project where I'd quietly flagged a huge risk in their timeline projections, and Brent had ignored me. They didn't know I'd kept copies. They didn't know I'd seen the discrepancies. They didn't even know I understood the model better than half their analysts did, because they never asked. That afternoon, I picked up my phone. I called Professor Halvorsen, my old advisor. He'd left the university last year to join a rival firm, Lexford Strategies, a bigger, sharper, tougher consultancy. We hadn't talked in months. I told him I needed 5 minutes of his time. He said, "I'll call you back." 15 minutes later, he did. I told him everything. Who the client was, what the project was, the errors, the inflated numbers, the unrealistic delivery dates, the shortcuts Brent's team was planning to take, the risks to the client's supply chain they were glossing over. Halvorsen didn't say much, just asked me questions. I answered, truthfully, clearly, calmly. I wasn't under an NDA. Brent hadn't bothered with one. I wasn't part of the project team, remember? By Wednesday, I heard Lexford had reached out to the client directly. By Thursday, Brent's meeting with the client got canceled. By Friday, the client pulled the plug. They cited strategic concerns. That's all they said. But I knew. Monday morning, Derek's desk was empty. HR escorted him out by noon. 2 weeks later, Brent's office was cleaned out. They called it mutual transition. I stayed, did my work, didn't say a word. The new department had called me in after she started in April. She said she'd been reviewing work logs and kept seeing my name attached to critical datasets. She said I seemed sharp. I nodded, said thank you. I still sit at the same desk, same chair, but every time I walk past the conference room where they humiliated me, I remember exactly what they said, and I remember what I did. The new department head's name was Marla Grant. She came in with this quiet, serious energy, not fake-friendly like Brent. She asked short, direct questions and expected real answers. People started straightening up when she walked by. The first few weeks, I kept my head down. I wasn't sure if she'd be any different. But then she started asking for reports, ones I'd worked on but never got credit for. I noticed she read everything, even the raw data logs. I figured maybe things would shift. But the old guard wasn't done with me yet. There were still people loyal to Brent, senior analysts who'd been part of his little circle. They didn't come at me openly, not like Derek did, but I started getting left out of group chats again. Project folders I needed were accidentally deleted. Files I'd worked on got sent to clients with my name erased from the log. It felt subtle at first, petty, but then it got worse. One afternoon, Marla called me in, said a client complained about missing data in a report I supposedly prepared. I knew that report. I stayed up until midnight fixing it after the senior analyst, Greg, sent me a broken draft. I pulled up the original file, the timestamp, everything, showed her how it was changed after I submitted it. Marla sat back in her chair, looked at the logs, said thank you. That's all I needed. Greg got written up. I thought maybe that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, another screw-up. This time, a financial projection sent to a major client came back with glaring errors. Under my name. Errors I knew I hadn't made. I double-checked the file history. It had been edited after I sent it off. I went straight to IT, asked them to check the server logs. They pulled the access records. Greg again. Marla didn't say a word when she fired him. Just sent him home in the middle of the afternoon with HR at his side. But by then I was on edge. I started wondering who else would come for me next. Turns out, it wasn't a who. It was a what. A rumor started floating around. First in whispers, then louder. That I'd only got to my promotion because I snitched on Brent and Derek. That I'd been feeding info to HR. That I'd sold them out for a career move. They called me a traitor. I'd walk into meetings and feel the stares. People stop replying to my emails. I'd sit at lunch and hear my name in half-heard conversations. One morning, I opened my desk drawer and found a printed-out email. My name on it. Sent from my work address. An email that accused Brent of misconduct in ugly, personal terms. Except I never wrote it. It was fake. They'd faked an email under my name and printed out. left it there for me to find. My hands shook when I brought it to Marla. I thought maybe even she wouldn't believe me this time. She read it, quietly. Then she looked up and said, "I'll handle this." By the end of the day, half the department's computers were audited. IT traced the fake email back to 2 junior analysts, people I barely spoke to. They were let go before the week ended. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was when I realized who'd put them up to it. It wasn't some random grudge. It was Brent. I heard it from one of the HR assistants I was friendly with. She'd overheard a conversation during Brent's exit process. Apparently, he'd hinted that if the little rat kept working there, someone ought to make sure she didn't last. Even after he was fired, he'd been feeding poison into the ears of the ones he left behind, turning them against me. I realized then I wasn't just fighting office politics. I was fighting a smear campaign left behind by a man who thought I should have known my place. And it wasn't over yet, because the next move wasn't going to come from my coworkers. It was going to come from Brent himself. I didn't think I'd hear from Brent again, but I did. It started with a LinkedIn message. Simple, short, "Hope you're enjoying your moment." No name, just that. I stared at it for a long time. He didn't block his account, didn't even try to hide it. I didn't reply. I figure he was just bitter. A man like him, losing his job, his status, his bonus. Maybe this was him lashing out. I told myself to ignore it. But then a client called Marla directly, said they'd gotten a strange email about me. An anonymous tip claiming I'd leaked sensitive project data while I was working under Brent. That I was a liability. The client forwarded the email. It was signed, "A concerned former colleague." The language was slick, formal, like it came from someone who knew exactly how to raise a red flag without sounding obvious. Marla called me into her office. She didn't accuse. She just asked, "Do you know anything about this?" I told her the truth. I even pulled up every email and file I'd worked on for that client. She nodded slowly, said I thought so. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came 2 days later. Marla asked me to join a client meeting, not as a note-taker, but as a lead analyst. It was a sudden invite, last minute. I almost said no, but I went. Halfway through the meeting, one of the clients mentioned something that stopped me cold. "We were a little concerned after hearing from your ex-director. He said your data was incomplete." Brent, he contacted the client directly, off the record, tried to poison them against me. But the real twist? The client wasn't buying it. They told Marla they'd done their own digging and found out Brent had been shopping his services around, offering them consulting work on the side, using stolen internal reports. Brent had been trying to undercut both Harefield and Lexford by setting himself up as a private consultant, using the same dirty tactics he'd used in the office, only now on clients. The client flagged it to Marla in the meeting quietly. That's when I learned something I didn't expect. Marla already knew. She'd been working with legal for weeks, building a case, tracking who Brent contacted, watching the fallout. She didn't tell anyone, not even me, because she wanted proof. She leaned in, smiled, and said to the client, "Thank you for confirming what we suspected." And I realized something right then. Marla hadn't just been defending me. She was setting Brent up. And somehow, I was part of the plan, not a victim, a key player. The smear campaign wasn't over. But maybe, for the first time, I wasn't fighting it alone. The following Monday, Marla asked me to stay late. She didn't explain why. I sat across from her in her office while the rest of the floor emptied out. She closed the door, folded her hands, and looked me straight in the eye. "I know Brent came after you. I know what he's been trying to do." I felt my stomach twist. I nodded. Marla leaned back in her chair. "What you don't know is that I've been waiting for him to make a mistake I could prove in court." She slid a thin folder across the table. It was filled with screenshots, emails, client statements, proof that Brent had used internal reports, client data, and even faked a few signatures trying to land side deals. "You're in here too," she said, "but not the way you think." I opened a folder. Mixed in with all the dirt on Brent were the fake emails sent about me, the anonymous tips, the forged documents pinned on me, All traced. All linked back. Through metadata, access logs, email headers. They had Brent. And they had proof I was framed. Marla looked at me hard. He wanted to destroy your name before we could catch him. I swallowed hard. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those papers. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Marla didn't blink. Because tomorrow morning I want you sitting next to me when we meet with the board. I want you to tell them everything. How you were treated. What you saw. The way Brent built a culture of fear in this department. I shook my head. I'm not a whistleblower. You are now. She smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile, but it was firm, and deep down I knew she was right. The next morning, I sat in a room with the board of directors. 6 people in sharp suits, eyes locked on me. I told them everything. How Brent ran the department like a boys' club. How they humiliated me in meetings. How they tried to erase my work. How Brent poisoned the office even after he left. How I stayed quiet, hoping it would stop. I told them how Brent's people faked emails, spread lies, sabotaged projects. I kept my voice steady. I told them I'd made mistakes too, staying silent, thinking it would go away if I just worked harder. When I finished, no one spoke for a long time. Then, one of the board members, a woman I'd never met, nodded once and said, "Thank you for your honesty." That afternoon, Marla and I stood in the HR office when Brent walked in. He looked surprised to see both of us there. His lawyer was with him. The head of HR laid it out. Harrifield was pressing formal charges against Brent for breach of contract, client tampering, and data theft. Lexford's legal team was involved too. The clients he tried to poach, they were all informed. His career was over. His reputation done. There wasn't a settlement offer. No graceful exit. Harrifield was going public. Brent just sat there, pale, his mouth tight. His lawyer whispered something in his ear. He didn't look at me once, but I looked at him. I wanted him to see my face when they told him he was finished. Afterward, I walked out with Marla. I thought maybe I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. I didn't. I felt empty, worn down, but I also felt free. In the weeks that followed, the department changed. Some people quit. Others apologized. A few kept their distance, but the whispering stopped. Marla gave me a new role, lead analyst. Not because she owed me, not because of pity, because I earned it. The last twist came 3 months later. I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Derek. No threats, no insults, just a simple line. "Guess you showed us all." I stared at it for a while. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I wasn't the scared, quiet new hire anymore. I'd stood my ground. I'd spoken up. And I'd watched the people who tried to crush me get buried by the weight of their own lies. That was enough.